Oh, how's it going if there's any? No, still I had this. Sorry, just trying to set. All right, we're gonna pause for a second. I'll be right back.
So I think
Still not doing
Joe
it.
Biden is
All right, we'll get it set up here soon, maybe. Hey, there we go. Capturing it better. Yep. There we go. That should be not bad. That down. There we go. Finally getting things. Oh, it changes it. Perfect. Good old Tim Pool just smiling there. That work? Changing screens that I'm going to use. Little different. That full. Oh, a little better. Get this dialed in. Okay, let's start spreading around live thing. Alright. Right. Let's podcast.
Still giving his press conference answering.
Well, Tim Pool gets a little crazy sometimes, but not too bad.
Down because we're at the point where there's been even a House Democrat saying he should resign outright, like not even step aside for re-election, but actually step down as president. More Democrats are stepping up, saying,
well, I'm working on that side of my desk at all, hey?
Clooney's done it. All the late-night hosts are saying no to Joe Biden, and Joe Biden keeps saying, well, I'm going to run anyway. Okay, the first thing he says in this press conference, which was delayed by an hour, mind you, was that Donald Trump was his vice president. I am not kidding. And we have the clip, and he said, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump if she couldn't have done it. And everyone was just like, oh. And then, like an hour before that, he introduced Ukraine's President Zelensky as President Putin, someone he admired and was very strong, and then went, he's going to beat Putin. And reporters called him out for it. And then, this is wild. I mean, at the press conference...
And my paperwork is a mess here.
They gave me a list of people to call on. I'm like, the whole thing's scripted. This is... I don't know what he's thinking. But I don't know how anyone believes this is not all part of the plan, because there's no way Biden would actually step out and be this bad. Unless that's just the way life is. So we're going to talk a lot about that. And we do have an update on Rep. Luna's inherent contempt against Merrick Garland, but a lot of big news pertaining to what's going on with Joe Biden, whether or not he steps down, and where this country goes. And then we do have some information on mass censorship, Elon Musk threatening to sue these big ad buyers. That's a big story. Before we get started, my friends, you got to head over to mypillow.com. Use promo code TIM. You got that website, the phone number up there right now, 800-544-8939. You guys know Mike Lindell. He's the MyPillow guy. And as you know, he's got no support now from the big box stores because they've all come after him. Cancel culture, that's what it is. So to help turn things around, they're having a $25 extravaganza, and they're sponsoring this show. When Mike started MyPillow, it was a problem solution one product company. Since then, with the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products, and some you may not even know about. To get the word out, they're having that $25 extravaganza. They got 2-pack multi-use MyPillows, just $25. MyPillow sandals, $25. 6-pack towel sets, $25. Brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, $25. For the first time ever, premium MyPillows with all new Giza fabric, any size and loft level, and king size, $25. It's not going to last long, so go to mypillow.com, use promo code TIM, and their phone number is, they got another number here, 800-925-90996. Again, promo code TIM. And I also want to shout this out. If you go to timcast.com, next week, we will be at the RNC for a special live show on July 18th, and Mike Lindell will be there. So will Luke Rudkowski, Hannah Claire Brimelow, Libby Emmons. I will be there. I don't know if there's any tickets left, but you can go to timcast.com, check to see. We'd love to see you there. It'll be epic. But also, click join us, become a member, support our work directly. We are going to have a very fun, members-only, uncensored call-in show. And I know all of you want to call in, but only a handful of you can. So make sure you sign up as a member right now. Submit your questions. You've got to sign up. If you're signing up as a new member, it's $25 a month. Or it's sign up at $10 for at least 6 months. We have to have this gatekeeping because we get, wackaloons who try to come in and cause problems. So we're trying to keep out the rabble who are trying to be disruptive. But if you sign up now, you can submit your questions. And then at 10 o'clock, we will have that uncensored show where you can actually join in and talk to us and our guests.
Back of a receipt. Show you anything, but that's how long this fucking receipt is for fuel.
Some lovely gentlemen from the Lotus.
One thing on that receipt.
Carl Benjamin. Hello. Who are you? What do you do?
I'm the director of LotusSeats.com, one of the hosts of the Lotus Seats podcast, and I've come over to say hi and hang out with my friends.
It's been a blast.
That's a
we played
decent
a couple
volume
of
for
games
them.
of Magic the
Looks like
Gathering.
they're quieter than me.
We did. I
Is
lost
right?
one. It's my own.
You did win one.
I did win one. It was my own deck, so it means I won both. But it's good to see you, Carl. Good friend. We're always happy to have you. And Connor's here as well.
Thank you very much, Tim. Appreciate it. I mean, we promised this since the last time I was on, and we will save the dueling for tomorrow morning. But I'm looking forward to that too.
I know, because Phil's here.
Hello, everybody. It's good to see you two gentlemen. I love you both to death. I am Phil Labonte. I'm the lead singer of the heavy metal band All That Remains. I'm an anti-communist and a counter-revolutionary. Hannah Claire, what's going on?
I'm happy to be here. I know nothing about Magic the Gathering. I think I'm here as tonight's diversity hire, so I'm happy to be here with all of you. We should get started.
A bunch of white men. That's all it is. I guess I don't count. Yeah.
No,
Well, you're sort of Asian and
you code
Sturgis
white,
from
though.
Africa.
I code
You
white.
code white, so.
All right. So right now, I think Biden is actually still giving his press conference. But let's talk about the nuances here. We have this excellent clip that just went out, I think, like 15, 20 minutes ago. Defiant Els, did he just call Trump his vice president? Let's roll tape.
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president.
Gee.
Let's start there. Look,
I think we should hear him out. I think he's making a good point. He picks Trump because he's qualified to be president. Yeah, go on, Biden.
There is no limit to the amount of money I would pay to have Donald Trump walk out and address at that moment and say, "That's right, Joe." Just roll with it.
If you look at the Libs of
imagine?
TikTok's account right now, there is a wonderful picture of I guess it's Donald Trump and Kamala Harris kind of mashed together. It's brilliant. Take a check.
Is he going to apologize for misgendering Donald Trump? Because I hear that's a bad thing.
He doesn't have to apologize. He's the first black female president, which he said a couple days ago, right? I mean, his gaffes are really getting bolder and bolder. Honestly, it's sort of entertaining.
It would be if he wasn't apparently the leader of the free world.
Sometimes when things are going wrong, you just have to laugh as they all come crumbling down.
It's kind of wild. There's speculation that there won't be a second debate because the first was so bad. The Trump administration does not want to give Biden an opportunity to recover from that. So now people are saying he might just say no and argue against it, which means the
Say
last
no on humanitarian grounds.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, and he would. He'd come out and say, "Just be too mean, can't do it," and make that the reason, and that would twice highlight Biden's frail mind and capabilities. But so this is what they're trying to do. The reason he's probably doing this press conference is because they know his polling's in the gutter. They know that he has to come out and look stronger, but every time he does, he just looks worse.
Well, there was that report that an unnamed staffer in Biden's administration had said, actually, we're kind of hoping that he embarrasses himself because that's the only way to get him to realize it's time for him to step aside. I mean, it's from The Atlantic. It's unnamed. I obviously, you take it with a grain of salt. But if that's the internal dialogue from the people who are, putting him on stage and providing him with a list of reporters to call on, it's not looking good.
I like the idea this is accelerationism, though, because I decided to torture myself right before this broadcast and pull up the front page of the New York Times, and the top stories were the George Clooney op-ed, and everyone saying Obama's probably behind this. The fact that they were that brazen means they're almost lending credibility to the fact that they want Biden to go. Then 3 unnamed sources. Again, they could well be the homeless man sitting in the corridor, but if they keep pushing it, then it means that they want it to be visible. And then also the idea, and I know this happened later in the press conference, that they were embarrassing the Biden campaign for pre-scripting questions and giving them to all of the news agencies. So if they're wanting to make the press conferences look illegitimate, when he's standing up there saying, "This is the best press conference you've ever seen," almost Trump-like language, and then have Biden have as many opportunities to make gaffes as possible, it's like they want Biden to get out as quickly as possible to install someone instead.
A major piece of this news cycle was that the Biden campaign was feeding questions to these radio hosts who would then ask him questions they wanted asked. And one of the first things, literally the first thing Biden does when he's going to questions, he goes, "I have a list here of who I'm supposed to call on."
Yeah.
I'm like, how is... This is on purpose, right?
But even then, the list, when he called on the people were critical of him. Are you going to step down? Is
That's why I'm like, it's got to be on purpose, right? Why would he call on them?
But the recurring question is, are you going to step down? And Biden's response was, no, you're going to have to carry me out as a mummy. Right? Like, for some reason. And the thing is, if it's this bad when it's clearly scripted, imagine what it would be if it was unscripted and live.
Just off the cuff. Oh.
Yeah.
This is why I think this is the scripted.
Well, maybe. I mean...
I can bask in the glory that is finally Joe Biden is being embarrassed and the media is telling everyone his brain is fried, and then go to my family and say, nah, I told you so. Or I can get even deeper into the conspiratorial and say, Biden is in on it, and the reason he waited this long was to keep RFK from winning the Democrat primary. He was the incumbent. He's the heir apparent. He's going to stay in. They're not going to replace him. And then once the primary is over and we're 6 weeks from the convention, now they can go, oh, well, I guess Biden's got to go. And that blocks RFK, who's now got an independent campaign and VP. There's no populist candidates who can come in. And more importantly, it gives Democrats the opportunity to, what they're now doing is advocating for a secret ballot among delegates. So no one knows who delegates voted for, just that they're going to go to the convention. The primary is nullified. The delegates are going to cast a secret ballot for, I don't know who, Michelle Obama. And so I can be, I gotta say, I think that one makes more sense than Biden intentionally went out and went, I have people I'm supposed to call on specifically, even though I was criticized for doing this. Like, what?
The thing is, Biden seems to be insanely arrogant and doesn't seem to realize how this whole thing looks. And I think that the Democrats are a kind of female-coded party.
Yes.
And they've come to the point now where they're being publicly embarrassed by his behavior. And if there's one thing that this female-coded party doesn't want to see, it's this kind of public embarrassment.
But then why have the debate?
Well, I haven't got all the answers, I'm afraid. You know, who knows? These are things that are all behind the scenes. But I think that there's a faction within the Democrats that is pro-Biden that has got a kind of dictatorial control of the party and doesn't want to let it go. And now they're all getting publicly embarrassed by Biden's repeated gaffes, and they're not sure what they're supposed to do. I mean, the fact that Jon Stewart is coming out and mocking him, like, that should be a sign it's long past time to go, and yet he's still here.
If he doesn't go, and I think that the reason that he's not gone is because at the end of the day, it is the president. I mean, he is the president, whether he's in charge of his faculties or not. He is the president, and there is no one that can actually force him out other than, you know,
Other than Jill Biden.
Yeah, and I think that has a lot to do with it. I think it's Jill Biden, and I think it's Hunter. And if he doesn't go, the all of the criticism
Hi, Aries.
by
How are
all
you
of
doing?
the Democrats isn't going
I can
to
go all
it's not going to
fuzzy.
be forgotten. The fact that there's been so much criticism
said.
recently, but everything was so pro Biden and
Bam.
he's sharp as a
Better.
tack, et cetera, for so long. I've said this multiple times on the internet. This is a national security threat. Like, this is something that makes every country on earth less safe because he's in charge of the nuclear arsenal of the United States. If he wanted to, he could unilaterally decide to launch a nuclear first strike. Now, whether or not they would actually do it, I hope they wouldn't, but
Declare the wrong country.
yeah, I know.
And he's done that before. When he was giving a speech and he kept saying Libya instead of Syria.
Yeah.
But let's we can tone that down a
Some
little
of those
bit,
are
Phil.
pretty terrible.
I know it's an
gaffes.
easy go to be like the nuclear football, right? But the fact they can order a commando raid accidentally on the wrong place is scary enough. Look at Afghanistan.
Yep. And so to your point, there are ample ways for this to go terribly wrong and throw the world into significantly more chaos than we're already in. And furthermore, if he were to somehow be elected again, right, and stay in office, there is no question in my mind that means that China and Russia are going to have a significant opportunity to push their agenda, whatever it may be. Now, I'm not saying they're going to take Taiwan and blah blah blah, but you can guarantee that they're going to look at Biden and they say he is not capable of being the commander in chief. You just look at the way that Blinken was treated when he had the summit in Alaska with the Chinese. They were incredibly disrespectful.
Same with the Saudis.
Yeah,
Saudis have been
cited, exactly. To your point, like, the rest of the people talk about how the rest of the world didn't respect Donald Trump and et cetera, et cetera. That was all just cope because Donald Trump actually did inspire fear, if only because they're like, he's kind of crazy. He might do some crazy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Here's what I'm saying, right? After 2016, Bernie Sanders, he should have won. They super delegated him, and they gave the questions in advance to CNN, all that stuff to make sure Bernie could not win, and they were terrified. Trump was not supposed to win at the RNC. The establishment was supposed to be in control, and Trump, much tougher than Bernie Sanders, would not back down. 2020, same thing. They had to have these centrist establishment candidates all bow out at the same time and endorse Joe Biden because Bernie was a serious threat. They could not have another convention, especially when you had, what was it, Dean Phillips? Was that his name?
Dean Phillips.
And you had RFK Jr. saying, we want on this ticket. And with people knowing Biden's frailty, even outside of the big press, there's a strong probability I think RFK Jr. would have won.
And
He's
he
hugely
is
unpopular in his own party.
They iced RFK Jr. out, said, you can't run. Biden is the incumbent. We don't want you. He's the one who's going to. So he says, fine, I'll be independent. Then at the very last minute, the Democrats are now proposing, Jon Stewart is now proposing a solution, whether there's, and they're not saying it directly, but this is a solution to their Bernie Sanders populist problem. The conventions, at least right now, and I'm willing to bet from now on, are going to be secret ballots where you have no idea. This is the Democrats already had a problem with super delegates. You guys familiar with how that works?
Yeah.
So outside of the primary votes, so you've got the delegates assigned by the primary, and then super delegates are just people like Donna Brazile, I think, and like Hillary Clinton, who choose who they want to be the nominee, regardless of what the people think. Now, because new information, Jon Stewart said, he called it new information, we should have a reassessment, a stress test on whether this candidate can actually do it. Democrats are arguing they should go to the convention and cast a secret ballot, and it'll be for someone else and no one will know, meaning there's no primaries anymore.
Yep.
It means the establishment uniparty will just decide who the candidate will be, and then you vote. Yeah, that's kind of like China and North Korea.
It's the UK, actually.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, because in 2019, Boris Johnson was elected and then cooed out on the basis of reputation destruction because he had parties during lockdown. So then it was put to the Conservative Party members whether or not they wanted to choose Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss. And Rishi Sunak was clearly the establishment international banking candidate.
He was.
Oh, Gamer Gal, Dad
Yes,
Cord,
he works at
thank you.
Goldman Sachs,
I'm just working
exactly.
away as
And
well,
then
Dad
you had
Cord,
Liz
so thanks for
Truss,
the
who,
lurk.
For all her faults, was
Just
very
listening to some
popular with the party.
podcasts, cruising
She
around,
was
so
elected,
we got
and
work
then
going on
in
here on that
49
screen.
days,
Oh,
she
we
decided
got a
to do
Stella
marginal
visit.
tax cut
Stell,
and also
how you doing?
wanted to lower immigration
doing, my
behind
dude?
the scenes. Was blackmailed by the banks and stabbed in the back by her own party, and Rishi Sunak was
How
installed.
are
Now,
y'all
if the
doing?
Democrats want to go with that, I might suggest they look
Have
to
to
the
turn down the
UK
podcast.
and
Look,
look at Rishi Sunak delivering the Conservative Party their worst
Louder
defeat
than
in a victory and reconsider.
But I don't think they can consider it
There we
from any
go.
other perspective, right? I think there's such internal chaos in the Democrat Party that they they can't look.
Thank you all
beyond
for the lurking. I
the
appreciate
vote
it.
of Congress. It was fascinating to me that Joe Biden sends this letter to them.
Got the
at,
working
you know,
lurking.
just a
We got the
letter
working
saying,
streaming.
going
I'm
to
just
run
cruising
on
through
Monday, this
paperwork
Monday.
here.
And then Nancy
And on a
Pelosi days
spreadsheet
later
over
goes
here,
on an
fucking
interview and says,
actual
"Well,
paper over
whatever he
here.
decides,
Stella's
we're
walking
just
all
waiting
over
for
the
him to make
paperwork.
decision sooner rather than
Estelle,
later would be
But
good.
you got to lean to get
He
into the
already
cam.
made a decision. Biden is very clear. He is staying on the ticket. What did he say in his George Stephanopoulos interview? Until the good Lord takes
You're so
him
helpful, Stella.
out of the race or tells him to leave or something like that. Like a little dark there, Joe.
Wow.
But he's not going to give this up, and so there's a level of like, if they were being strategic and considering how these types of strategies had affected other countries, maybe, but they're dealing with a really obstinate old man who is not leaving this position, and they don't know how to navigate their way out of it.
Let's jump to the story from the Post-Millennial. Biden flubs Zelensky introduction, calls him President Putin at NATO summit. Now, I know all of you listening, we know Joe Biden gaffes all the time, and he calls people the wrong names, and he makes up words that are not words. So this is not surprising to you.
He's a lot like Shakespeare.
That's right. It's right. Sometimes you just got to make the word and then tell people what it means. What is surprising is that his own campaign account mocked him for it. We are at the point now where, okay, so, you know, a few weeks ago, we're posting these videos like, that's a weird thing Joe Biden just did. Did he poop his pants? And they're like, that's a cheap fake.
Yeah.
You've edited that to make that look bad. Now, the Biden-Harris HQ account is literally posting them outright. Take a look at this. They actually posted, President Biden, ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin, he's going to beat President Putin.
Hell,
Zelensky says,
hitting
"I'm
buttons
better."
on my phone.
And he
That's
says,
the worst
"You're
part
how
about a
better?"
naked cat. They can
They're just
activate your phone
outright posting
quite
these
easily.
things themselves. Here's the clip.
And now I want to hand it over to the president
Hey, Stell.
of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
Fuck.
He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky.
I like the part how
Not
he's.
beating Putin.
Holy fuck. That's bad.
I like how he sounded like he surprised himself.
You are a
Yeah.
hell of a
Right.
better.
Like, he heard it after he said it and went, did someone just say Putin?
I'm just glad the war's over.
Yeah.
That's a rough gaff by old Biden there.
In about 6 months, that might be accurate.
The funniest bit about this, though, is Zelensky's reaction to it. You don't see it on this clip. You can see Zelensky's processing it through the filter of it being a second language. He's just like,
Oh,
oh no.
thanks for stopping by, Gamer Gal. Really appreciate it.
Next, that doesn't lose me billions. Of
Yeah.
dollars.
Well, you can see the calculation going thick and fast in Zelensky's head.
How many times
How
do
have
think
you
this
been
video
doing?
played in Moscow now, where Biden is saying President Putin, and then Zelensky has to take the mic next. I mean, it's just humiliating.
The Russian pundits are going
Bella's
to
figured out where she's just barely on cam over there.
The president soon, right? But okay, so here's
Even
the
Joe
here-
Biden thinks so.
look. The war in Ukraine. I would like to talk about that too. But why is the Biden campaign website posting this clip? There's no
Because-
upside.
And
Because some unfortunate Zoomer has
Typing
been
is
paid
hard.
to run this account.
Screw
And
that
there's
up.
just
Hope
nothing they can do with it.
any of those
What am I
in.
going to say? Well, you know, ugh, it's out of my hands. It's
Like
literally
that
in
w-
God's hands now.
It's like Eminem said in like 8 Mile. It's like if you make fun of yourself, you take the
Yeah,
sting
yeah.
out of
They're
it.
trying to make this look like Willy Wonka walking out to the gates and
Yeah.
doing a roll.
Yeah, only he's not gonna roll. He's gonna like fall directly into a coffin.
I think they've just had months of.
And Kamala's just throwing the soil on top.
She's
She's
like,
like, come on, Joe.
She's like,
Just
"Please."
grease the steps up to Air Force One.
She's ready. No, I mean, I think to a certain extent, this is just the result of months and months of, well, if we do anything to praise Zelensky, that's good. American people like it when we do that. So if it's actually, us saying, oh, Zelensky is better than Putin, then surely they'll let this go. They won't realize how horrible this is for us. It's the only spin I could imagine going on behind
trailer.
the scenes.
I think I think that's it. The idea is like they know it's bad. They know literally everyone watched. They know the purpose of these pressers are to try and build confidence in
Hey,
Biden.
still, quit
and
hitting the keyboard.
only thing they can do is
Gotta tuck her tail underneath my arm so
There's
that it
a kind of
doesn't whip
war weariness
face.
in the Biden campaign. Like every day
there.
they get up and it's like, okay, yeah, President Putin is ruling Ukraine. Vice President Trump is going to be the best president ever. Yeah, got it. Yeah, it's just another day on the trail. We're just going to get through this. He can't live forever. He can't have too many. He just can't have too many years left. We're just going to get through it.
It's like you ever see that meme where Death has got the crane game, and he grabs a guy, and it's like someone would die, and then he's like, George Carlin,
There,
is
so
Henry
that-
Kissinger even in this thing? So
That was the one forever.
yeah, just every time some
Yeah.
famous person died, it's like, and then when someone made the meme when Kissinger did die, and he was like, and it just said Death said finally, like he got him. Biden is what 2 years past average life expectancy for an American male. It's 79.
He's trying to break
Really
his own
t-
record as United States' oldest president. It's just very sad.
Well, every day he breaks the
Every
record.
day.
I know.
Every
Didn't
day
he
is
once
a new
say he
record.
was in the Senate for
We do
2
one.
centuries?
That day we
One of his gaffes.
I sort of.
Was
might
that a
be
gaff?
true.
Was that a gaff?
Sure, he has been
Well,
haunting the
there was-
Senate for a long time.
There was a tweet you put out once that said every politician, there was right-wing politicians, but I think this applies, either has werewolf or vampire physiognomy.
Yeah.
And I think Trump's the werewolf, Biden's definitely the
Ten-
vampire.
That is funny. Yeah. Was that? I saw that too. Was that you?
Yeah, that was me. Yeah.
That about explains it.
I mean, Zelensky's got the werewolf physiognomy, right?
Yo, Odie, how you doing?
But we tip our hats and wish them all the best. 3-0 now, Alberta. Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out?
Shit, that's loud.
Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out?
Hopefully that didn't come through as loud for you guys as it did for me because that was almost deafening. That was so loud. Good times, good times.
It's not like you guys don't have enough to deal with. But like, the whole thing.
Have to
is-
play-
I mean, we just watch.
Play with that volume down, and now I got to turn the podcast up just a touch. Not that anybody probably cares about this podcast. I mean, it's Timcast IRL. It was kind of quiet. Oh yeah, your warehouse is fucking probably loud, hey?
One thing that I've
Probably
noticed
right
that the
about
New
there.
Worlders have in a mindset difference from the old worlders.
That up
The
to
old
about
worlders
there.
think in just much longer terms than the new worlders. Like everyone's thinking, oh,
A little bit
what's
more, a
China
little bit more.
thinking of Biden. China doesn't really care about Biden. China's
And
thinking
less
in
of
terms
me.
hundreds of
Ouch.
years.
Ouch.
So they're thinking, right, if America is at this point now, where are you going to be in 50 years' time?
Yuck.
And the answer is probably in a worse position.
You know, one idea I love in sci-fi is like not even sci-fi, but if we were to launch a spaceship with humans on it towards, say, Alpha
Yes.
Centauri,
Yeah.
they'd be
This is
halfway
not the shape
there
of somebody that
when
turns down
a
food.
more advanced human spaceship would go past them.
I thought you were going to say when Joe Biden leaves office.
I guess my
so-
point is,
But yeah, I get you.
it's this trope in sci-fi where it's like
12.
the technology would advance so
Bit of safety
fast
meeting.
that by
The
the
excavator
time
opened up
they're
fence.
halfway,
Secondary
we've already
locate.
well advanced beyond and we can go faster. That's the mentality of China. The 1,000-year plan, I think they call it.
Riser and
They're
pipeline,
not thinking
swamp
about
and-
how they're interacting with us today. They're thinking
just-
about in 20 years we're going to have A, B, and C, and we're going to intersect with where we think the United States is going to be.
No.
What do we need to build to counteract that?
Yeah.
And by the time we get to that point, and the U.S. is like, "Hey, look, China just launched a bunch of satellites that are a threat to us. We better too late because they already planned for that and they've already counteracted that."
Yeah.
That's what we're dealing with internationally. So, agreed.
One thing about democratic politics, it makes you very focused on the here and now and the day-to-day constant partisan battle.
Yeah,
They don't
I
have
sure
that in
did
China,
because
they
my
don't have that in
shoulder's
Russia.
still not
This is why Putin has
100%, so
actually done
I am not
as
doing
well as
push-ups
he
until
has
that bad
done
boy is good.
in the war in Ukraine. He's obviously been preparing for this. He's kind of like judo fit
There.
the Western economy. We
Have a
expect him to
bundle left,
economically crush
12 hours
Russia,
on
and
the
that's actually not what
bed.
happened.
Do
Actually, everyone's food.
Hydrate, you bastard! Hydrate!
Fuel prices
Hydrate.
Actually, everything got a lot
Hydrating
worse
with
for us.
Rockstar
And
counts, right?
Things aren't
Or
going
does it need to be
brilliantly in
water?
Ukraine, despite how much men and material and treasure we pour into it. So he's been thinking of this in much longer terms than us, whereas us in the sort of boxing
Like we
ring
needed
of
a
democratic
2
politics
4
haven't been thinking about this in the long term at all.
What do you think happens with Europe and
Eggs.
the UK if Trump wins?
Oh, that'll be
Water.
fun. So there's
Fine,
been a
I'll go get
conversation
some
recently
water.
because the Labour Party won the recent election, and we now have a new foreign secretary, a blithering idiot by the name of David Lammy.
Blithering left wing idiot.
Redundant phrase,
Left
honestly.
wing.
Yeah, I know.
If you go,
Not all idiots are left wing, but all left wingers are idiots.
Point well made. If you go on the account of one of my favourite Twitter anons, Cunley Drukpa, he has a clip of David Lammy when he went on the show Mastermind. Which,
I
if
even
you're not
washed my
aware,
water
because outside
glass.
the UK, you sit down.
Tony
and
must
you
not
are
love me
quizzed on a
anymore.
Specialist subject. David Lammy chose his specialist subject and got 0, if I remember correctly, and 1 on the general knowledge.
But he would answer ridiculous questions. Like he would say something like, "Oh, who is Edward VII's son?" And he would say Edward VI. And it's like, no, that's not how chronology works.
Lines of success.
That would obviously be at the very least his father, and it's just stuff like that. And
So
not our best and brightest. And now
not only is he not
not
our best and
sending your
brightest,
we're not.
Back to work.
Well, on
All
the
right.
topic of Trump, he has
We got
made
the
some
water, we got the
interesting
hydrate
statements on
here.
President Trump before.
Trump's a white supremacist.
Yes, he's a racist, he's a sexist, all this and that. And now he's probably looking at dealing with him. And the suggestion has actually been recently, now that Nigel Farage is an MP, Trump could just go as a maverick. Why would I want to talk to the foreign secretary? I'm only dealing with Nigel.
Okay, we got
He's an
plugs, we
elected
got
official.
tags,
Be
we
We could
got
just go round him.
trailer.
I mean, on a personal level, if Trump came to the UK, he would definitely
Texas
meet
bed
with Nigel
truck.
Farage anyway.
Yeah.
So
That should
it
be
would,
There.
even if it wasn't sort of de facto or de jure, it would look de facto like Nigel was dealing with
Ticket for
Trump as
travel.
in an official capacity. So, but the Labour Party is incredibly left wing, and they know that they're probably going to have to make a really difficult,
This
pragmatic
as
decision to deal
6 and
with
9.
the giant orange right wing evil that they've been decrying for the past 5 years. And so that's
What's the
pretty
last number? 6
But
and
what's
19 location.
for a while? I mean, we can go back to Brexit, right?
Sure.
A lot of people felt that Brexit was like a precursor, not necessarily a precursor, but was like a sign Trump was coming.
It was very much the same sort of thing. The same forces underpinned Brexit that they did with Trump, and Brexit was slightly before Trump, but it was the same kind of populist energy. Wait, we're not in favour of the global uniparty state. That's gonna
Oh,
manage and
tactical.
administer every
Doing
aspect of our
good,
life.
doing good. How
Very
about
much the
yourself?
same
How you
impulse.
been?
But how's it going over there now?
Oh, terribly.
So should we? So I don't know. That kind of makes me not so confident for November.
Oh
here.
no,
Become
it's
a
not that
hero.
things have gone well. It's that we have
Become
got
a
the
legend.
Conservative Party. The Conservative Party are a
Become a helldiver.
Left wing.
literal treasonous. I mean,
Am I
weird
wrong?
deviant-
I've landed up a mountain.
Just get kicked out.
Better get me jump back.
You guys personally?
Yeah,
Yes.
we personally got
We-
kicked
so
out. of the
what-
Conservative Party.
During
I think my
Phil
problem
Hunter's
is I've got to
Celebrate
split up
Braven's
my
speech at
audio
NatCon,
channels a bit more than I
we
currently
got
have them
emails
split
saying
up.
That you have been removed from the Conservative Party. Please don't share this email.
What I do is shout out for old Odie
So
there
of
because
course
he
you
does
just
his
shout.
mod duties all the
Yeah,
time.
no, I understand this.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
loud.
40 fucking subs. We're not worthy. We're not worthy. We're not. We're risking.
I love that it says it's on cooldown, but it just worked, no problem. Oh, those are so loud on my end. I turned down the desktop audio, so hopefully it didn't fucking deafen you guys, but holy shit, that was loud. I've got to really separate out my audio channels better and figure that out. Holy.
And they actively have a plan to destroy it, obviously.
Death.
Which is why things are going so badly, and which is why they're going down so
Done
many polls,
for.
because the Conservative Party are the right-wing party.
Zero
of
here, he
course, they're all
laughed.
a bunch of gay
What?
liberals, and I mean
Oh, hi,
that,
Aries.
they're
How you
gay
doing, my
liberals.
boy?
And so they
We have a
who
puppy that wants to be
join
up.
gay liberal
Hi.
parties.
How you doing, bud?
So people are like, okay, well, I'm not going to vote for this, and I'm not going to be lied to.
Aries!
Party were also a gay liberal party. I said, look, we're going to destroy this country, by the way. Vote for us.
Needs all
And
the
so people
scratchies.
were like, well, we're just not going to vote Conservative. And what that meant is the Labour Party
Right?
flooded
That was
across the
reasonable.
electoral map
with a lower vote share than in 2019 when they were defeated.
with a lower vote share than an actual communist. So that goes to show you how disengaged people are from British
Now you can't
politics
hear the
now.
podcast.
How is the
Just
how
no
is
winning.
Scotland
I'll
doing?
dial it
It's
in.
put
I'll
over
dial
this-
that
right,
podcast up
and
just a
Ireland too, I
touch.
believe, right? And
Up
I'm
on
not
that
talking
area.
about Northern Ireland. I
All
mean,
the Celts are communists.
it's fascinating to
Mad.
me.
Not
it-
down
it
on
is,
my
it's fascinating
headset.
to me because I actually find it pretty remarkable when I went to Northern Ireland
Work is
several years
overrated.
ago.
Hi, buddy.
How
you doing? How you doing?
you know, they did not reunify, but the borders opened
Oh.
because of the Schengen zone,
Yep.
and the general sentiment overwhelmingly was
Okay, I got to do some work, dude.
Ireland is no longer for the Irish.
Up,
I
down.
mean,
Up, down.
I want to stress this. It's
Here you go.
crazy.
Get going.
There's bloody death being fought in the Troubles because people of Ireland
Good job,
wanted
dude.
their country.
I
They
grew
wanted
up
their
on that.
language, right? And I remember when I was a kid, we had close families that I really loved to visit Ireland, and my dad's like, the things that are going on there. Now, there's that
Add a
viral
little
video. I think it was
bit
Derry.
up.
Is that the name of the town?
Derry, yeah.
Derry, where they ask people, what do you think the most common name in Derry this year was?
Mohammed.
And it's Muhammad.
It was the second most common in England as well.
So
There we go.
it's fascinating for me
Everybody's
to
got
see
a little
Scotland,
bigger there.
right?
Oh yeah.
They will. What is the line? They'll take our
Lives,
land,
they'll never
lives.
take our freedom.
Yeah, and
the reason
Yeah.
the reason is they basically have white ethno-nationalism because they
Uh,
hate the English. But in order to have
no,
that
for
in the liberal
11th.
paradigm, you need to dress it up in minoritarian concerns. So they're like,
Lunch.
we want Scotland for the Scottish to then become a vassal state of global
But-
immigration and
they
the
spent
EU.
so much time
They
fighting, like hundreds of years, thousands of years fighting you, and then they're just like, oh well.
The Scots were able and willing partners in the empire, so Scottish nationalism based on victimhood of the English is nonsense, and that can just go. No, it's a total lie. Every battle, they're like, "Oh, we got crushed by the English." It was actually Scottish troops who were loyal to the crown, right? Because actually, it was a Scottish king on the throne, so that can all die, right? But the Irish, like I grew up. My father was in the Royal Air Force, so I grew up on military camps, and you would have threat warnings. And so, basically IRA
Yeah.
activity, and they would, have things like, look, check under your car, walk different ways to work.
Shoot me.
They bombed the
Once you
Conservative
go
Party
ninja,
conference.
you never
because
go.
they bombed
Awesome,
Conservative
thanks.
Party conferences.
Thanks,
And
dude.
they did
Appreciate
like
you
that.
lurking.
Because it's hard to move
And
when
then
you're
Jeremy
dead.
Corbyn tried to invite IRA to bloody Parliament directly after.
Boy, dinner.
And
Make something
so
good.
the fact that the IRA, the militant wing, and then Sinn Féin, the political wing of the IRA, were obviously rabidly Ireland for the Irish. And the thing is, personally, I can see the logic behind it, right? Yeah, it's the Irish as an ethnic group deserve their own state because I think that's how the old world works, and that's totally normal. That's most peoples require ethnic autonomy to make sure they're not being exploited by another people. That's totally sensible. It makes perfect sense.
Yep.
No one will question it. But now Sinn Féin are literally Ireland for everyone. And
Yeah.
all of the Irish that's Sinn Féin's the Northern Irish Party, but like all of the Southern Irish parties are Irish for everyone. It's no longer just orange and green. It's a rainbow for Ireland. And it's like, wow, I can't believe you guys got sold out so quickly by your own
you're right.
politicians. But the thing is, I'm in England. All of our politicians have sold us out. England isn't for the English. Wales isn't for the Welsh. Scotland isn't for the Scottish. The entire UK has been sold out by its political class.
It's fascinating what we're seeing in France
Okay,
with
got
Marine Le
that.
Pen's. What's the national?
National Rally.
Yeah, they're doing really really well, but they still are up against this leftist coalition. There's
well, not just leftist, centrist leftist coalition. It's literally everyone against. Macron just destroyed his own vote share to save leftism from Le Pen.
Right, like I mean, I'll be like my view is that the centrists are just leftists with holding up
I agree.
masks, right? Because this is the power that they lend to. It's the power they want for whatever reason. And my prediction for what happens to Europe, you need only look at the United States. And I think that's the actual plan, and has been the plan for several decades.
Wife just
They
sent me a
want
meme.
to dissolve the cultural bonds of each sovereign country of Europe, so they function more or less like the way U.S. states do, in that the United States used to have
It's pretty good.
regional dialects, regional diction, and when television emerges, it was it was the thing to do if you were a television anchor who was going national to
I run an
eliminate
excavator. It's great.
regional diction and make sure you spoke in a way
I
that was like
Damn it,
flat,
stop it.
and then the Chicago accent,
Stop
the
being
Southern
blurry.
accent,
Son of a
you had
bitch.
the Valley Girl. You have all these different ways of talking that have started to evaporate as everyone starts to adhere
we
to
go.
the national way of talking. Then, no borders. Anybody can move to any state they want at any moment, vote in anything they want, and then leave right away. Europe,
Yeah, so we
with the
get all
European
of it
Union,
together.
is trying to accomplish what the United States is when all of these sovereign states, pre-Civil War, was much more like the EU, and then the war happens. The famous saying is that we went from saying the United States are to the United States is. That's what they want Europe to be. How do you do that? In the United States, state government is so incredibly powerful but completely ignored. Nobody pays attention. They don't know who their local reps are, and we could change this country
That
overnight
one's
if everyone focused on their
slightly
local elections. But it's
saved that,
culturally
so-
evaporated. This is what they want for Europe.
This is a conscious effort as well.
Absolutely.
They're very clear. I mean, this is why we have a Supreme Court. This is why we have all like different kind of chambers in the same manner as the United States. It's a very conscious effort to Americanize the entire European continent and homogenize the whole thing. But you'll notice that it's not
because
just in
that'd
Europe
be easy.
and the European states. Even those countries outside of Europe, it's the entire what they call the international community. And if you plot that on a map, you realize how small a slice of the world that actually is.
Yeah.
They want this for every single country because what they're trying to do is create a world state. They want to create an international administrative world state that has complete control over all of our countries. And I don't like to talk about the WEF, the World Economic Forum, that much, but because it's not directly powerful. But it's the kind of place where the like-minded people who all want that same goal go to organize.
It's a cocktail party.
It's a cocktail party
But it's
for
an
these
influential
people
one, yeah.
who all agree on the same subject. And so you can see why people would naturally gravitate and go, well, this is a WEF agenda. Yeah, it is. This is what this is.
Well, on Brexit as well, this is important to note. Keir Starmer, the current Prime Minister, served in the shadow cabinet of Jeremy Corbyn beforehand, even though he doesn't like to think that he did, as the Brexit negotiator pushing for a second referendum. He's a lawyer. He is currently under the thrall of Tony Blair. Tony Blair has taken from his titular Tony Blair Institute Starmer's government and packed it out with all of his advisors. They definitely want to get back into the EU. And they've already said, right, we're going to do a bespoke deal with Europe. We're not going to undo Brexit. We're just going to get
That
closer
it
to
did
them
it all
on
in the right
trade
order.
and on regulations. And Michel Barnier, who was one of the top executives of the EU, turned around and said, well, that means accepting free goods and free movement of people. So don't be surprised if in the next 5 years, Brexit is de facto, if not de jure, abolished.
I've been seeing a lot of reporting on this, especially when reports are critical of Nigel Farage. They basically say it was a dumb idea and it never would have worked, and they're going to change their mind on it and beg to be let back into the EU.
Oh, it could totally have worked if we'd just seen ourselves in competition with the European Union. I mean, the corporate tax rate is the one, the point I always make because it's just such an obvious one. You know, any pro-Brexit government, when the Conservatives took on the mantle of Brexit, they should have just, I mean, they had this plan for Singapore on Thames, which would have been very, very low corporate tax rate, because at the moment our corporate tax rate is 25%, which is high anyway. But Ireland's corporate tax rate, so the closest country that shares a land border with us, connected to the European Union, is 12.5. So it's exactly half, which I don't think is a coincidence.
It wasn't. Janet Yellen and Rishi Sunak collaborated to make a global corporate tax rate, and Ireland dissented.
Right. And so the European Union as a whole has a way of keeping companies right on Britain's border. So when in Britain, if you were to get like money from Google or something like that, it comes from Google Ireland, because they're of course all headquartered in Dublin. And so the Conservatives could have come out and gone, great, guess what our corporate tax rate is going to be? Well, 6.5, 0, whatever you want. You would have, if you wanted to be competitive, you would have come out and really abolished that and been like, right, guys, come over. We've got loads of great talent, loads of great universities, loads of really educated people. We're going to take over. But we haven't done that. And we're instead
and it's
essentially
all
becoming
over
a vassal state. of the
crystal.
On that as well, the reason Brexit was voted for was immigration. Okay.
Oh, God, yeah.
Last year, to reiterate to our American viewers, the UK, in a country the size of New York State, let in 1.2 million people legally, with an extra 2 million visitor visas, obvious overstays, and 50,000 illegals. And this was
3 years in a row.
under the Conservative Party. And so essentially Brexit was punished by betrayal, and because the administrators of Brexit were the Conservative Party, the voters voted for lower immigration, the Remainers wanted to stay in the EU, the Brexiteers and the Conservative Party wanted global Britain. They saw the European Union as a constraint to having not enough Indian, Chinese, Pakistani immigration.
Do you understand? I know you understand exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
They are going to decimate the individual culture of Great Britain, so that you have too many warring factions and there will be no unified culture around anything. They're going to do that in France. They're going to do it in Spain. They're already doing it in these other countries. And the end result is going to be to create a flat, static, randomized system, in a cultural system. The end goal of multiculturalism is to make sure that there is no unified force that will be in control or rise up against you. Britain and France will be the same, a mishmash hodgepodge of random cultures and ideas that are in conflict with each other. So that way,
Preaching to the choir, man. We
Exactly.
totally agree.
I disagree. I think
disagree too.
I think that you're going to end up because Islam is not a weak.
no, you misunderstand.
Yeah, it's
If-
that Tim's describing what they want. You're
Yes.
describing what they're
What
going
will
to
they-
get.
what they're going to get.
But if Islam takes over,
Oh, the
Europe,
screen went blank.
That is
What the
part of-
shit?
that is fine. The goal is how do we
There we go.
homogenize Europe so that it functions
Doesn't like when I
much
do
like
too
the
many
United
things,
States.
apparently.
That each individual country of Europe will not be
Good
an
there.
R, but Europe is.
At least the sound would have
And
been there the
so
whole time, and that's
they
what.
bring in as many different people as possible, en masse, as quickly as possible. This will disrupt and displace traditional
Got
British
daily
values.
tickets done.
The British people will be in conflict constantly with their neighbors, so they're unable to do anything.
I do not.
And then
Top
you will,
costs.
your political parties are making sure this is happening, and it will look the same in Britain, in Spain, in the Netherlands, all over the place.
It's going to look like the Middle East.
And that's fine because it gives you a homogenized control structure. So Europe becomes one thing. If they can, if they could make all of Europe adhere to the same language and the same beliefs, they would do it, and they don't care what it is. The way you do that is you burn it down and build it up. So the idea would be, you've got too many people who are British and speak English. You've got too many people who are French who speak French. The Spanish, they speak Spanish, and they don't communicate the same language. Now, it is true that Europe, with its proximity in years, many people in Europe do speak each other's languages and
Sure,
based on
but
their proximity.
They're a strong national culture still.
Right. So you look at the United States and France even. French is dying out in Canada. In Quebec, it's very hard for them to maintain French. We have only a couple places in the U.S. where French is even a language, and everyone is speaking the same dialect now. California and Idaho are the same place. It doesn't even matter anymore. And so we have a lot of problems with the structure of our government, immigration, et cetera. You look at how the United States is. You can pack up and move to any place you want without question, get your ID changed in 5 minutes. I'm being somewhat, I'm exaggerating. You move from New York to Idaho.
No, I get you.
You walk right in, you're an Idaho resident. Boom.
Wait,
It's
what's
crazy,
bullshit?
actually, how ready.
Yeah,
Americans are to just
they're
pick up and
so.
move somewhere else.
This whole
Technology
Timcast
is very
IRL,
different.
they're so
Well,
wrong
it's not
on
just
almost
that.
everything
This is
Canada.
part of like a kind of uniquely
Most of the
American
time.
mindset.
Like,
when we were at the national,
they know
NatCon,
nothing about Canada.
convention earlier.
Yeah.
And on the Monday,
They fuck up
one
almost
of the
everything they
chaps
say
giving
about
the
Canada.
speech was like, well, look, if
They're-
you don't have
like French
a particular kind of
literally
church in
can't
town,
die
then
in Quebec
You go to this other town, and if you can't get there, you go to the, if you can't do that, you move to another state. And I'm like,
pastor, by the way.
by law.
he was a
That like
pastor, yeah, he was a pastor.
yeah.
And I'm
They
just
just-
like,
they don't have a fucking
my
clue.
ancestors fought
Most of the
in
stuff they talk about
Alfred
that's
the
not
Great
in the
against
States
Vikings.
is
I'm
wrong.
going to die in Wessex.
There is-
My bones are going to be buried there.
There is
And hopefully, God willing, my sons will as well. Like this nomadic culture is crazy.
It's not ubiquitous
Excellent.
in the United States.
Yeah.
It's
See,
places like specifically
up
like
over there.
Texas. Texas is full of Texans.
Right.
And they look at themselves as and I consider myself a New Englander.
I would say New England.
Yeah, and because
Only place in the
one of the
world
things
that does
you
not.
talk about frequently, and
You see
That's
what I'm saying,
fucking
that
crazy,
this
actually.
nomad culture is very common.
it's very very common and very normal, and I think that's partially because of the fact that you can travel so easily from state to state without
Yeah,
having
like,
been that way for
these
basically,
guys
for
don't
the
have a
entirety
fucking
of-
clue
the existence.
about that
Like,
stuff. They're
I consider
entertaining,
myself
but
New
a lot
Englander,
of their
even
stuff
when
is
I've lived in other places where I
sensationalist
travel,
and
I'm from New England.
not
And
correct.
part of that is because, like you had said,
They point out a lot of
before,
things where you're like,
the,
oh,
the United
I should look
States
into
is
this.
kind of the fulfillment.
Put Charlie
of
on.
of the
Find
English
some
promise,
Turning
right,
Point
is
USA,
what
Charlie
that-
Kirk
the
stuff.
United States is the, for lack of a better term, the fulfillment of the English promise. And I honestly, I take that to heart, and I feel that because I look at New England and Massachusetts as something that is more than just a place. It's where America started. It's where the idea for America really started in Massachusetts. And even
He
though I
doesn't
don't
do
live
the
in
long
Massachusetts,
form
I live in New
stuff all that
Hampshire,
much anymore,
just
does he?
15 minutes over the line in New Hampshire because of legality.
Yeah, most of his stuff is all
myself a New Englander, and there's as much history in New Hampshire
like
as there is in Massachusetts. I mean, I've got
an hour
tattoo
at
of
most.
Massachusetts on my arm specifically because it's something that I do feel is a part of me. So I don't think that it's something that's totally foreign to Americans,
Sure,
but
sure.
Well, I
you
would-
definitely
but-
have
but-
it on a point.
But the issue is,
Knowing that it keeps
we're,
backing it
you
out
know,
for
what are we, 100 what are we looking at, 180, 160 years
stop doing the.
from the fracture point where the
Maybe I'll put
states
on a
have
Jordan
homogenized
Peterson
in such a way.
podcast here soon.
So
get one of
I
his
look at it like
really
this.
in-depth
We
psychological
are
one.
more
I
nomadic
like
than
his
Europe.
in-depth psychological
It is
stuff.
easier for someone from Massachusetts
When you
to go
start talking to
California
Jordan Peterson
and set
about
up a life
fucking
because it's
geopolitical
it's
stuff,
nearly
it's-
identical cultures.
might
Now
as
the
well.
weather's different. The laws are a little bit different. Gun control and stuff are. I don't. Democrats
the
are
laws
not really the same.
basically the same. The language is
Yep.
basically the same. The culture, the customs, they're all very, very similar. I mean, essentially.
I don't think
in
we're
England,
learning
the
much on
equivalent of
this
me moving to
podcast. Like,
Yorkshire or something like this. Moving
you
to
guys are
Northern
rambling on,
Ireland,
but there's
people got a
nothing
different accent.
really
We've
of
got a few different
substance, I'm
mannerisms,
saying.
But technically, it's way easier than moving to France, right?
Right.
Way easier than moving to Spain.
And France
Ah.
is what, 2 hours?
oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
not even. I mean,
Not
depending
even.
on
There's
where you
really
are.
nothing
Yeah,
of
yeah, no,
substance
it's
going on
Entirely
in this
different language,
podcast.
different food,
Different
smoking
legal
cigarettes and
code.
eating snails.
Yeah.
So we do have different legal codes, and this does matter because some states
They
have
fall into a
constitutional
lot
carry,
of
some don't.
stereotypical
But
shit.
culturally,
And usually it's
comedy,
Tim just
everything.
joking
In-
around,
in
but
France, it's
kinda
it's
takes
not
away
just
from
that
it.
the
And
after 2
laws are
weeks they
different,
come and
it's
move-
the structure of the legal code that's different.
Right.
You still have common
Exactly.
law across the United States.
let's see.
even if
What's
that manifests in
Jordan
slightly
Peterson's
different
latest one?
in,
Heaven, The
in
Matrix,
France,
Dark
they have
Matter,
the
and
imperial.
Aliens with
In the
Dr.
Napoleonic
David
Empire,
Kipping.
it's a totally different approach.
What do you think? What do you
And so-
think?
So my point is,
Are you
the
feeling
only reason
talking about Heaven, The
we are
Matrix,
more
Dark
nomadic,
Matter, and
like, we
Aliens?
still do have that.
How you feeling on
fills up
that?
in Massachusetts,
Yeah.
but we're losing it, and they are trying to dismantle.
Why
that.
not? Let's
That's why
do
they
it.
want to get rid of the electoral college.
Yep.
This is why they bring in non-citizen en masse to the tens of millions because
It'll be
they're
better
trying
than
to-
listening to these guys.
So
They're kind of just
we
rambling.
are, a primate, and we have our brains and our with that thing.
Skip his intro. There we go.
Hello, everybody. I'm talking today with Dr. David Kipping, a scientist, an associate professor of astronomy and director of the Cool Worlds Lab at Columbia, recently tenured. He's published already over 100 peer-reviewed
Hi, Stell.
articles,
How you doing?
research articles, and is an active communicator regarding scientific matters on YouTube. Cool Worlds YouTube channel. What did we talk about? We talked about, well, the position of man and woman in the universe. Are we alone? We talked about the means by which the exoplanets that could harbor alien life have been discovered and assessed, and what those planets look like. We talked about the potential progression of civilizations at different technological levels and how that might be
Beck,
detected
I am
in
Singing
the
Wind,
cosmological
chief of the
space.
Martian tribe.
We talked
Take me
about
to your leader.
Dyson spheres and the utilization
Moving
of the
along.
energy that a sun produces for moving the technological enterprise forward. We talked about the Big Bang and some of the challenges that have been posed to the axioms and theories of modern cosmology in the light of the development of the James Watt telescope. And we talked about the pursuit of astrophysics as a career. And so join us. All right, well, let's start with the big question, I suppose. I know that you study the possibility of life elsewhere in the universe. And so I suppose the big question that goes along with that is, are we alone in the universe?
That's a question that so many scientists have very assertive answers to. They feel very confident they know what the answer to. And typically the response is, well, of course, there must be. There's sort of two ways of answering that. Whether you're
Aw,
talking
thank
about
you for
simple life,
resubbing
like
with the
prototype
Prime
life,
there.
whether you're going all the way
Going on a
to
solid
intelligent
4
civilizations,
months of
comparable to our own,
awesomeness.
or even
Been a
far more
subscriber right from the
sophisticated.
beginning.
But on both fronts, the most intellectually honest answer that I can offer you,
gotta keep
is,
'em
I don't
separated.
know.
And we'll just deafen you again for good measure.
That we're not. Our job as scientists is not to pre-guess what the answer is, but rather to do the experiment, collect the data, and then to analyze it and determine the most likely outcome. But I do have a lot of trepidation about how overly zealous and confident some of my colleagues are on this topic.
Be deaf picked up
because
the
I'm
smelly
just
dorks.
so aware of the
So,
danger
the other
of
great thing
experimental
about Captain
bias,
Vogues,
which of
he
course in
does
psychology is
Horsepower
a
for
very
Hope up here
common
in Edmonton, so
issue
he
as
does a
well
lot
with
of
many
charity
experiments
work.
that have
He's
been done, where you
really good
when you
dude,
think
actually.
You know what the answer to an experiment is, you can consciously or subconsciously influence the outcome.
They're
of
doing
how you conduct that
Horsepower for
experiment,
Hope
how you
this
interpret
weekend,
it.
right? It's
So
on
I
Saturday,
just say
so
let's try to be
if any of you
forcibly
are up in the
agnostic.
Edmonton
I hope the
area,
answer
go
is
check it
yes.
out.
I hope
It's good
there's someone
cause
out there,
for,
but
I think
think
it's
it does us a disservice to our
Canadian
objectivity
Cancer Society,
when we
right?
say, of
That,
course,
is
there
that what
must
it's for
be.
there?
Well, it seems to me that part of the problem is that all the answers to the question seem preposterous, right? Yes, there's life elsewhere. Okay,
Kids with Cancer
then
Society.
The first question, perhaps, that
I think
comes
that's a
up
pretty
there
damn
is
good one to go and
where,
support.
and then what? And if there isn't, well, that seems completely preposterous because it seems so utterly unlikely.
I'll
Given
be
the
up in that
vast
part of the world for the
magnitude
weekend.
of
Make sure to hit me
of
up
the
on Discord
universe
if you
that
got
we
time
would
up here, and
somehow
we'll
be
go for a
alone
beer.
in. The meaning of that seems so incomprehensible.
Well, you'll
that
probably be busy as hell if you're coming
I
up
can
here. It's for a
understand why
reason.
Scientists, particularly, would be loath to accept that. It implies a very peculiar kind of uniqueness.
Good. I think
to
I've got all
Earth.
the receipts that
And
I need
then I
now,
suppose the third problem is,
except for the one that I'm waiting on.
well, are there other civilizations? Well, the only species that's ever managed a civilization, even on Earth,
I
is
just gotta
human
start
beings,
punching 'em
and
in.
that's only really occurred in the last few 100,000 years.
You had a
So
drink at my
even
dad's.
in a place
Perfect.
Where we know there's life, the
There's anything more
probability of
Canadian than that, I
an
don't know what it
advanced
is.
Technological civilization that can sustain itself seems, well, it's happened once. Once isn't very many times. I know that human civilization has emerged in different places, but really only after the last ice age and only in a few places that communicated very rapidly. So, further thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of remind me of Arthur C. Clarke's famous quote about this, that there's two possibilities, and both of them are equally terrifying, that either we are alone
Right,
or
right.
surrounded. And I think you're right on the money in terms of the cognitive dissonance that both of those seem to imply. I think there are ways out. If the universe is teeming with microbial simple life, then I think we could probably be okay with that scenario in terms of compatibility with the observations. We look out at these exoplanets, and as impressive as our instrumentation is, with especially the James Webb Space Telescope, even that facility is not capable of detecting biosignatures, life on another planet, unless we're extremely fortuitous with the types of signatures that they present. So it's very unlikely that even JWST would be able to detect biosignatures. We're probably looking at the next generation of telescopes to make that experiment. So therefore, the fact that nobody has made a headline yet saying microbes discovered on Proxima Centauri B or choose your favorite exoplanet is not surprising. So we can perhaps be comfortable with the idea that the universe is compatible with being full of simple life. But then that raises the question, that means therefore the simple life does not go on very often to at least form galactic empires, right? Something like you see in like Star Wars or Star Trek, where you have these federations spanning the galaxy.
Right. Well, I read a mathematical analysis years ago in Scientific American about from a scientist who had been arguing strenuously against the existence of advanced civilizations, because he calculated that even a spacefaring civilization that had reasonably but not absurdly fast interstellar craft could populate an entire galaxy over the span of something approximating 1 million or a couple of million years. And given that the universe is 14 billion years old, perhaps, that's 14,000 such time spans. And yet, well, where the hell are the aliens? And so, that was an interesting argument as far as I was concerned. I'd never seen it sort of formulated like that from a kind of quasi-arithmetic perspective.
That's known as Hart's Fact A. So there's this idea of the Fermi paradox that I'm sure you've heard of. Many of your viewers have probably heard of, this idea of, if everybody's out there, why don't we see them? We should see evidence for them. But kind of the stronger version of Fermi paradox is not so much about radio signals or ships flying through space, but it really is the aspect of colonization, that if there really is a galactic empire that has some will to span themselves across multiple planets, which remember is essentially what we're trying to do. I mean, Elon Musk often talks about this.
Oh, Alms, how you doing, dude?
Almost an obligation
Thanks for stopping
to try
by.
and continue the flame of consciousness, as he describes
Son of a
it. And that's
bitch,
why
I
he
am
wants
missing
to
a
go
receipt.
multiplanetary, to go to Mars and to build a colony there. It's perfectly natural that any species that's interested in self-perpetuation would see the obvious benefits of trying to expand to other colonies, to other planets, and eventually even to other stars. Because let's face it, even if you're all in the solar system, it
Shit,
can
that
only take
sucks.
a nearby supernovae or gamma ray burst to completely extinguish all life in this solar system. So there's an obvious need that I think it's hard to argue why, at least at a common rate, you'd expect a survival instinct to encourage civilizations to want to do this. And yet there is the problem, because as far as we can tell, that has not happened. We do not see stars which have been engineered. We do not see galactic spanning empires or dancing spheres littering the sky. So it appears, as far as we can tell, that if there are others out there, they're certainly not at a rate where they dominate the galaxy. If they are, they're very rare, and maybe there are one or two, a handful of stars, a sprinkling of stars, if you like, but they certainly don't dominate. And that's perplexing, because you would think a survival instinct would be to go out and get as many as you could.
Well, it's also perplexing in that if such civilizations are possible, then, and they've done it at
no,
all,
that's not a fucking...
then why aren't they everywhere? I mean, is it
This
just
one?
the fact that by
Yeah,
some
I'm not very good at
strange
this.
fluke of time and space that we're either the first ones to even vaguely attempt this, or that it's somehow set up so that...
And I feel like I'm
this
missing
is
a bunch of
equally
receipts, and
improbable
that's terrifying.
that no advanced civilization
At least I'm the one that has to give me
exists
trouble.
managed to get to that point. It just doesn't seem that...
Accountant's gonna be
especially
pissed.
given that we seem in some ways, as you pointed out, to be on the verge of that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's very perplexing.
yes,
I think
mysteries everywhere.
one of the strangest things, I think one of the things we have a lot of resistance to is the idea of any kind of suggestion that we might be special. I think astronomers and cosmologists have a real aversion to that idea, and it's kind of built into this idea called the cosmological principle. So when we look out around the universe, this patch of the universe is not any different from any other patch of the universe. That's kind of foundational to how we understand the nature around us. And so it is a problem then. It would seem incongruous to this principle if we admit that perhaps we are the first, or we are the only one, or maybe the Earth is the only planet in the whole galaxy which is capable, maybe not of microbial life, but getting all the way to this point. And yet at the same time, so this is called the Copernican principle sometimes as well, the mediocrity principle. But what flies in the face of that argument, and I hear that argument all the time by many optimists, let's say, for
Date
life
on
in the
that
universe.
bitch.
What flies in the face of that is what's known as the weak anthropic principle. And this is an idea that Brandon Carter wrote about in the 1970s.
Why do they put
and
the
he was
date in
thinking
such a
about
weird
cosmology
spot
as
on
well,
these
and
petrochem?
things like the fine-tuning of constants of the universe, the speed of light, the mass of the electron. These all seem to
7-2-20.
also be kind of finely tuned such that life is possible in this universe. And if you change any of those numbers, then we really shouldn't be here to talk about it. But of course, an obvious answer to that is that maybe there are many, many universes out there, and it just so happens that we live in the one which is tuned just right for life, because of course it couldn't be any other way. How we can't live elsewhere. So this really comes down to why the planet might be special.
Okay, a couple of things there. I've never really understood the tuning argument, because it seems to me that if you're a Darwinian,
9904.
you've already taken care of that problem. It isn't so much that the universe is tuned, it's that we're adapted to the constants that are in place. Now, I suppose you could argue that without those particular constants, our form of life wouldn't be possible, but I don't think that actually shifts the problem with the argument. So, because we have our form of life, and we can't conceptualize, or at least not very accurately, what any other form of life what other form life might take. Now, I know that, people have made the case that there's something particularly special about carbon insofar as because of its ability to combine in ways that make very complex molecules probable and even likely. But I still, the fine-tuning argument always seems to me to put the cart before the horse. It's like, well, you adapt to the constants that present themselves. So, of course, it appears in retrospect that everything's been finely tuned. And I don't see that, I'm inclined towards, what would you say, deistic belief in some fundamental way. But I don't think the fine-tuning argument is a very good argument for the existence of the specialness, let's say, of the human psyche. So I don't know. Maybe I've just got that wrong.
Yeah, I think if I can just respond to that, I think there's an interesting aspect is it almost gets into the philosophical a little bit, is the experience of the observer themselves. So we are, a primate, and we have our brains in our head, and we have these two eyes, and our version of experience is really defined by the bodies we inhabit and the planet we live on. It may very well be that there is plenty of quote unquote intelligent life, however you want to call that, out there that is just so radically different that its experience is not really comparable to our own. So you could imagine a fungus that lives on a planet and it totally inhabits it, and it's basically a giant neural network that's on that planet, and its version of experience would be completely atypical to that of ours. And so when we use this argument of well, with the weak anthropic principle, we experience this sort of version of events, and thus everything has to be sort of attuned such that that's the case. There may be parallel paths. And so when we talk about this rare earth and we talk about weak anthropic principle, it's really a funnel to this particular type of experience that we enjoy. And it's perfectly possible there are completely alternates, but then that's not perhaps so satisfying, because if there is a planet covered in fungus, we're not going to have a communication with that thing. So it doesn't really scratch the itch. I think when we talk about the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, we really do hope, maybe naively, to actually engage in a conversation or communication or an interaction of some meaningful sense where we can understand one another's minds. And that, in my opinion, is probably too aspirational. I don't think that's very likely to occur.
Well, again, you look at the earthly situation, because you would assume that that's the simplest place to look for first. And we can communicate to some degree with mammals that are psychophysiologically similar to us. I suppose the biggest gap we've managed to bridge might be with octopi, right? Because I've seen, and I don't know how accurate these accounts are, but I've seen some documentary evidence, let's say, of people establishing something akin to at least a relationship of curiosity with octopi. And they're very exploratory, and they have the kind of tentacles that are sufficiently close to hands that you could imagine a kind of parallel mucking about with things intelligence that characterizes octopi, because they can manipulate so well. But that's about it on Earth, and that includes cetaceans. I mean, we've been trying to communicate with whales and dolphins, porpoises, and so forth for 60 years, really, with some degree of intensity, and it isn't obvious that that's gone very far. Whales are sufficiently different from us so that even if we could talk, it's not clear what we would talk about. That was what E.O. Wilson's arguments about ants. I think if we could talk to ants, we'd have nothing to say to each other, because that's a consequence of that psychophysiological embedding that you described. We don't really understand, I think, when we think of our consciousness as like a free-floating entity, how grounded in our hands, for example, our consciousness really is.
Yeah, I agree. And even between different cultures of humanity, it can sometimes be extremely difficult to have conversations and understand one another's mindset. So I totally agree. It puts me in...
Even with your wife.
Yeah, sometimes that does happen as well. So I think it's perfectly possible that I'm willing to let go of this idea of the fatherly figure. It's almost like a stand-in for a god. You know, the fatherly figure alien comes down and teaches us the error of our ways, provides all this advanced technology, shepherds us to becoming more sophisticated and mature. I think that's a complete fiction. I think if there is other life out there, it's likely vastly more different than we can possibly imagine. But that doesn't make it scientifically not interesting. It's still extremely, perhaps even more scientifically interesting to investigate it, because we already know about this experience. So I think learning about these other possible forms of life could be extremely rewarding. But I really don't have a bet in the game as to whether that's even possible. As I said before, I do try to remain forcibly agnostic, that I'm actually okay with the idea of just lots of empty worlds out there.
Yeah, you mentioned the mediocrity principle, essentially, and that earlier, if I got that right. And that seems to me to be a reasonable variant of Occam's razor, right? There's no reason to assume a priori that this corner of the universe is any different from the rest of the universe than you would assume any given handful of sand differs from all the sand on a given beach. And so, but having said that, and I do think that's a good scientific starting point, we are definitely stuck with the problem that here we are, and we are conscious, and we seem to be rather unique in that regard. And so that does challenge that assumption of, what did you describe it as? I think it was the assumption of mediocrity.
Yeah, or Copernican principle.
That scientists start with. Yeah.
So I think an obvious counterexample to the mediocrity principle, and I often say this when I teach my students about this idea, is a case where it breaks down is in the solar system, thinking about, say, oxygen atmospheres. So before we had studied any of the planets in the solar system, we would live on a planet with an oxygen atmosphere and say, hey, we must assume that everywhere is typical, and we cannot assume we are special, and therefore oxygen atmospheres must be very, very common on all of the other planets in the solar system. And then lo and behold, not a single moon or planet in the solar system out of, over 100 of those things has an oxygen-rich atmosphere. Now, it's not all liquid water or, plate tectonic. You can go on. There's a list of things. And so it's not maybe surprising that that is the case because, of course, we could not live on Pluto if it lacks an oxygen atmosphere. We have to necessarily live on the rare instantiation where oxygen is because that's a prerequisite, at least for mammalian life. So I think this mediocrity principle, it's okay to use it in cases where your existence is not predicated upon that statement. So if I was to say the solar system has a Neptune, as far as we know, Neptune has no bearing whatsoever on the probability of life developing on the Earth. So by the Copernican principle, many of the solar systems should have Neptunes.
Hey,
And
you,
you'd be right. In
dipshit.
fact, Neptunes are the most
Yeah, you,
common
the
type of
one looking
planet
at the
in
phone all
universe,
googly
and
eyed.
Jupiter's too are very
Did you
common.
eat
So
today?
it'd be perfectly reasonable to apply
Did
it
you
in
drink
those
water?
instances. It'd be very dangerous to
No,
apply it to say
I
our
fucking
large moon,
thought
'cause
not.
our large moon
Go get on
may
that
or may
shit.
not. We still
Drank
You're a
water and an
beautiful
energy drink.
flower
That
that
counts.
needs
supply from this planet.
nourishment.
Similarly, oxygen certainly
You're
does,
an
liquid water
absolute
certainly does.
gem.
So
I
we
want
can't
you
take
healthy and
those properties,
happy.
I would say, and generalize them. 'cause
I
we're
do
here
this
because
because I
those things
care
are-
about you, dumbass.
Just recently, Saudi Arabia ended its 50-year petrodollar deal with the U.S., which has the potential to weaken the U.S. dollar.
Oh, I love
Since
how they do
1974,
these.
Saudi Arabia has sold oil solely in U.S. dollars, which was huge for our global economic dominance. Now, they want other options. If there's less demand for the U.S. dollar, what happens to its value? It's reasons like this that make it important to diversify some of your savings into gold, and you can do that with help from Birch Gold. Right now, qualifying purchases by July 31st are eligible to get a
bucko.
one-of-a-kind, limited edition
I'll eat later.
Golden Truth
You're
Bomb.
gonna feed me.
The only way to claim your eligibility, though, is by texting Jordan to 989898. For over 20 years, Birch Gold Group has helped
bucks
tens
and
of thousands of Americans
bugs.
to protect their
Bullshit.
savings by converting an IRA or
The invoice
401k
number on
into
that
an
son of a
IRA
bitch.
in physical gold. Protect your savings by diversifying away from the
Your
U.S.
number.
dollar with gold. Text Jordan to 989898 and Birch Gold will help you convert an old IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold for no money out of pocket. Right now, qualifying purchases by July 31st are eligible to get a one-of-a-kind, limited edition Golden Truth Bomb. Text Jordan to 989898. That's Jordan to 989898 today.
Yeah. So I guess the question there is
There-
how many of the prerequisites for the complex life that has emerged on Earth are the function of features that are just as uncommon in some sense as life? And that is a very interesting exception to that rule of homogeneity, let's say, because it is even from a statistical, from a very
Fucking fight
basic
better, dude.
statistical perspective, it is odd given that principle that the Earth would be the only planet that has oxygen on it. I know that's also a function of life. So that's a very difficult puzzle to work through intellectually, because I can certainly understand why the presumption of homogeneity is a useful presumption. It works in many cases, and why it would not work in the case of Earth is a great mystery. Hey, I've got a question for you that I've always wondered about. I see people looking for life on Mars, analyzing rocks from Mars, for example, or meteorites. And I think this, to me, thinking biologically, this just seems utterly preposterous to me, because I don't think life is the sort of thing, like on a given planet, where it would be somewhere hidden and hard to find. I mean, if you look at Earth, I don't know how far down we've gone into the Earth's core to continue to check for microorganisms, but I read not so long ago that there's more biomass in the Earth's crust than there is on the surface. I mean,
I should not have
life
been sitting
seems to be one of
cross-legged on my
those
chair like
things
that.
if
That
it's
was
anywhere,
stupid. Fucking Timmy.
it's everywhere. Yeah. And so, I mean, is the argument that Mars underwent a cataclysm at some point, hypothetically, that was so overwhelming that it destroyed all life, but maybe there's some signs of it sequestered somewhere? Like, what's the rationale for the search?
Yeah, I think that's exactly one very plausible scenario. We certainly do know that Mars has undergone significant changes. We see evidence of liquid water once flowing on the surface in the past. There's many geological features that we see that strongly indicate, almost unambiguously, that liquid water must have been there at significant levels. It's just unclear for how long. So it may have been like flash floods that just kind of appeared briefly, or it may have been a sustained body of water. This obviously is not the case any longer. And thus, we can surmise from this that something has happened to Mars over time. It's probably lost its magnetic field over time. That has probably decayed. That has led to the sputtering of the atmosphere. It's probably lost its atmosphere over time, has a much thinner atmosphere than it once did. And so I think we can imagine, this is almost like kind of looking ahead to the Earth's future. When we make projections about the biosphere of our own planet, most of those projections actually predict that the biosphere will gradually decline. Actually, probably it's already slowly in decline at this point. The sun is gradually warming up and producing more luminosity. That is putting greater pressure, if you like, on the Earth's biosphere until we hit this point where it becomes harder and harder for life to keep up with the amount of insulation we're receiving. And so most of these predictions predict that after about 1 billion years into the future, Earth's biosphere will essentially collapse, and the only things left will be living in extreme conditions, such as very cold caves that have been protected from that intense scorching heat. You might have some subterranean life, as you allude to, deep in the mantle or deep in the crust. And so we can imagine pockets of life surviving that are the relics of a once rich biosphere. Now that's possible. It still raises the problem why we don't see fossils.
Okay, now I need to start scanning all of these in, which is just as annoying.
On Mars, if you are an optimist that it had life, it certainly was nothing like the kind of extent that we had here on the Earth. And having said that, it is another possibility is that life could transfer between them. So it's also there's the idea of panspermia. Perhaps there is life on the Earth which is being knocked off on asteroids. It's clinging on.
I gotta
maybe
do a
tardigrade
real
is
quick
clinging onto
break
an asteroid
here.
or something.
Gonna put
And
it
can
on the
actually
Be Right
survive the
Back.
vacuum of space, these
Pause
things.
everything.
We don't know if it could survive an impact.
And you guys don't want to listen to me shit. Be right back. All right, we're back.
Like mushroom spores.
Right. Yeah. So they could just propagate across the solar system. Mars would be one of the places that, I mean, it's surely the most hospitable place after the Earth. And so you would imagine if anywhere is going to be a place where extremophiles, which are highly adapted for extreme conditions here on the Earth, they might have a chance of surviving in some of the remnant pockets of habitability left on Mars at this point.
Right. Okay. So that's the rationale. So now, have you also been interested in the issue of, this is a strange kind of science fiction like issue. I've seen descriptions in the pop scientific culture online, I suppose, of the notion of different civilizational types. So is that a notion that you've toyed with to any degree?
Yeah, this is probably the Kardashev scaling you're thinking of. So this was a Nikolai Kardashev, was a Russian Soviet Union physicist, I think in the 60s or 70s. And he wanted to try and come up with a way of classifying different potential civilizations out there. And he argued that the most reasonable way to do this, and many people would disagree with him, I think, but he argued the most reasonable way would be energy usage. And so he calculated that a type 1 civilization, as he defined it, would be one that uses all of the irradiation that hits the planet. So, imagine you cover the whole Earth in solar panels, and there are 100% efficient solar panels, and the energy you collect equals the energy you use. So that would be a type 1 civilization. Now, in practice, you couldn't do it with solar panels, of course. You had nowhere to live, so you'd probably have structures in space to make this really work. But it's the energy usage which really matters. Going to a type 2 is the energy of a star, and a type 3 is the energy of an entire galaxy. So there is interest. I think the reason why we like this is that if it's purely in terms of energy, we think we have a pretty good grasp on thermodynamics, and we think it's fairly immutable that any civilization must operate within the rules of thermodynamics. And so this places some fairly firm observational limits on how often this happens. If there really were civilizations out there that were harvesting all the energy from their star, using it for work, so imagine like your laptop running, it produces still waste heat. And if you actually collected all the waste heat that it radiates, it would be equal to the amount of power that goes in. Has to be an energy balance, conservation of energy, one of the laws of thermodynamics. So we can look at these across the sky and see if there are stars which are essentially invisible in visible light, because all that radiation is being absorbed, but radiating in the kind of waste heat band passes, which would be like infrared heat signatures. And we've been looking for those. Actually, a few weeks ago, there was a couple of 7 candidates that were announced by a group. They were scanning the sky, looking for objects which had these anomalous infrared excesses. They're very interesting. However, another group soon after showed that 3 of these 7 candidates happened to co-align with known radio sources, which they surmised were most likely background galaxies or things very far away that were covered in dust. We know that galaxies do often get covered in dust, and that can produce a similar type of signature to that which they see. And so they argued that 3 of the 7 are definitely false positives. And in fact, when you run the numbers, it's perfectly possible the other 4 are too, we haven't seen the galaxies yet. But the density of these objects, given the number of stars they looked at, looked consistent with them all being false positives. So we don't have any compelling evidence for those objects, but it is nice that it's an observational test we can do. One of my colleagues, Jason Wright, led a survey out of Penn State where they surveyed 100,000 nearby galaxies to see if the entire galaxy had been converted this way. And so this is looking for what we call the Kardashev type 3 civilizations. And they found that basically there was no strong candidates. And so this is, really intriguing. Like we look around and we don't see nearby galaxies. After 100,000 of them do not appear. It's very rare that they appear to have been converted in this way. And similarly for many stars, about 100,000 nearby stars have been surveyed similar to this. So it's very curious. It means that if civilizations do develop, they probably don't ever reach this Kardashev type 2 or type 3. Maybe they go to the virtual world. Maybe the idea of just developing with physical structures to ad infinitum doesn't make sense. And eventually we all, go into the metaverse, whatever it is, and just decide to live in a virtual world rather than the physical world.
Yes, well, in some ways that would be a more straightforward thing to do, obviously, because we're already doing that, and it's definitely less resource intense. So, yeah. So what got you interested
Sounded sad there, hey?
In your line of research? And you have about 100 papers. So why don't you outline first the full range of your research, or at least the
A
bulk
full
of your
move into
research,
like
so
the
that we can
metaverse
flesh out all the
would be
domains
kind
that
of
we
sad.
might discuss.
It,
And
like, if
then I'd like to know,
that
what
really
it
does
was that
go and-
sparked your interest in what you're
Sure.
pursuing.
Not
Yeah,
already
thank
in this
you.
simulation.
So, I work on many different things. My main area of research is exoplanets. So these are planets orbiting other stars, which we've been talking about thus far. And that has always been a fascinating topic to me, just because it was fairly new. Only in the last 30 years have we been able to make this reach of being able to actually detect these things for the first time. However, in doing, for me, when you look for exoplanets, certainly when I started looking for exoplanets, I would be immediately interested in the possibility of life and intelligent life, as we've been talking about. And many of my colleagues would kind of giggle and laugh about that. It still carries what we call the giggle factor, the field of SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, SETI, SETI. And still many of my colleagues kind of dismiss that as kind of a frivolous activity. But for me, it's always been obvious that if we're going to look for stars, which could have planets, and then we're going to look for planets that could have, Earth-like conditions, then surely the end point of this entire intellectual exercise is to ask the question whether they have life on them. I don't understand what we're doing if we're not going to eventually shoot at that question. So I was never shy of addressing that. And so a lot of my research has broadened out into questions of astrobiology, technosignatures, which is kind of a modern rebranding of SETI, ways to look for technology in the universe, such as the Dyson spheres that we've spoken about. And increasingly, I've been interested in statistics and the application of statistics to these types of problems, where, as we've already pointed out, you're very data starved. We don't have a catalog of
all those.
of
We're going to
habitats
file them
out there,
very
known habitats. We
thoroughly
don't have a
and
catalog of
properly.
civilizations discovered
them in a
thus
drawer.
far. So we are trying to make inferences about our uniqueness, which to me is one of the most
Oh, you don't.
interesting and fundamental questions we can ask, is how special or common are we out there in the universe? And we are trying to make inferences based off very little data, a paucity of data. And to me, that's always just been intellectually very stimulating, to try and work on that fringe of where you know so little, but there's actually still some information there. There is still something there. There's information about the timing of when Earth developed, when life developed on the Earth. There's information about the future of our planet. We know that from the evolution of the sun. There's information about the fact we don't see galactic empires. And
Give me a hell yeah!
Piece this puzzle together and not give necessarily a definitive answer, but at least limit the options down to what is the landscape of what's
Anybody
possible.
sleeping? Not
Okay,
anymore.
So you mentioned that it's been about 30 years that we've had the technological capacity to even detect exoplanets. And so do you want to talk a little bit about what that technology consists of, when we started to discover these planets, and then also how in the world do you, in fact, discover them?
Yeah, it's a long enterprise we've been trying to do. Ever since 1855, there's actually the first paper published trying to make the first claim of an exoplanet. It's a lovely story of Captain William S. Jacob. He was at Madras Observatory in India, and he was trying to use a technique back then called astrometry, which is essentially, we still try to do it, but it's looking at wobbling stars. That's what we mean by astrometry. Stars and measuring their positions very carefully. He was inspired by the detection of many binary star systems this way, especially by Friedrich
Well,
Bessel,
Zach dumps
a
in
German
his
astronomer.
picture.
However, this method never really bore fruit until really
I think
only
I'm
the
done
last
till
few years have we been able to
Monday.
make reliably detections
Nice.
using this
Fuck
method.
yeah.
So the first method which gave us success was pulsar timing, which was kind of ignored. This happened in the early 1990s. I think 1990 was the first ever claim of this method. It was largely ignored because pulsars are so strange. They are neutron stars. So these are stars which aren't quite massive enough to collapse into a black hole when they die, but not too far off. So they're kind of the predecessor. If you actually spooned a bit more mass onto them, you could probably tip them over the edge into becoming a black hole. And these things produce these very powerful magnetic jets out of their north and south pole. And as they spin, it's like a lighthouse spinning, and they spin extremely fast, like as fast as a blender, basically, like once per millisecond they can spin. And we can use these as clocks, like a cosmic clock of the universe. And so if there's a planet orbiting it, it disturbs that clock gravitationally, and we can detect its presence indirectly. So the first planets were found that way.
Yeah, we're looking good.
However, no
Looking
Nobel Prize
good.
was given to that. You might think, since that was the first ever discovery, it's Alexander Wolfskan at Penn State, a very incredible discovery. It was largely ignored and still is often overlooked in the scientific community. And it wasn't until we discovered planets around quote unquote normal stars, which really means stars similar to our sun, which are not neutron stars. These are stars in their main part of their life, their main sequence lifetime, as we would say. And the discovery there was through, again, a wobbling method, but through a speed wobbling method rather than a position method. So if a planet is tugging on a star and making it move, yes, its position changes, but also its speed relative to us is changing. So when it's coming towards us, it'll be blue shifted. When it's coming away from us, red shifted is the classic analogy. Is an ambulance going past you on the sidewalk. Its siren will kind of appear higher pitch as it's driving towards you and sound lower pitch as it's moving away. And we can use that same change in pitch to discover exoplanets. So in 1995, Michel Mayor and Didier Queloz made the first discovery of 51 Pegasi b, the first real bona fide exoplanet around a normal star. And that was actually where the Nobel Prize was awarded to, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. But still, I think reasonably many colleagues in the pulsar world have been saying, like, hold on, like, what about us? Like, we were 5 years before you.
All right. I think I'm shut her down here. Thank you for
Why
the people
does
that
the
stuck with me
existence of a
chat a little
planet-
bit while I was
why
getting
does
some
that
work
alter the
done.
shift of the
I'm
light?
gonna
I
pop
don't-
this.
I'm
Probably
missing
go
something.
watch
Yes, it's a
Stax's
gravitational
stream just
effect.
because they've
So
got a
the
fucking
planet-
Q&A going
really,
on
we
about
often
what's
think
going
of
on with their
the
whole Lurk fam
planet
thing.
orbiting a star, and the
I
star
just
just
want
kind
to
of
check
sits
that
there
on out and
inertly.
what's going
static,
down.
But that's not true.
So
Really,
thank you
it's
everybody
not
for
the-
sticking
no,
with
it's
me.
not the Earth
If
orbits
you,
the sun.
I'll share the
Earth
link
and
with
the sun
the
orbit
current
one
podcast that
another.
we're watching.
And so the
So
sun
Right,
y'all
is
can keep
therefore
going if you would like.
moving in inertial space.
That is the
sometimes a little
one
bit towards
we
us
are
in
currently
response
at
to the
in
Earth's
it.
gravitational field. So it's this influence that we can look for.
35-ish.
Right. They both rotate around.
Thank you all
their
for sticking
center
with
of
me.
mass, don't
Really
they? The center
appreciate
of
it.
mass of the
We're gonna raid on over and tie to Stacks. To all of you on the Rumble, Kick, or YouTube, thank you for stopping by. Really do appreciate it. We're gonna stop your stream right away, and we're just stuff because very nice.